So let's talk about the GoPro Hero 10 and the reports of overheating issues. Maybe you're looking at the GoPro Hero 10 and haven't decided yet to make a purchase, or maybe you've purchased the GoPro Hero 10 and you've heard the overheating reports and are a bit concerned. In this video, I'm going to provide a summary of the overheating issues, the use cases in which the overheating tends to occur, and finally, I'm going to provide several solutions for resolving the overheating issue. So first of all, many of you may be wondering, what happens when this camera overheats? I'm glad you asked. I did a lot of testing for this video and put the GoPro in situations where I expected it to overheat. I've actually had zero overheating issues so far with the GoPro Hero 10, so I actually had to work to get it to overheat, just so that I could demonstrate and find solutions. Here's what happens when it overheats. As you can see, the camera flashes a nice little message on the screen letting you know it's overheated, and then the camera proceeds to power off. This is because GoPro has engineered the camera to have software that detects the temperature getting too high, and instead of allowing the camera to be damaged, the camera will turn off on its own. Now I will say overheating issues are not new or unique to the Hero 10. I have seen overheating issues on the GoPros ever since the Hero 5 Black. I will also say this issue is not unique to GoPro. Other brands of action cameras also have their own overheating issues, and I've also seen a lot of DSLRs that have overheating issues as well. Some of them you can override the issue, but it'll flash a big scary message on the screen warning you that you could destroy your camera. However, at the core of this discussion, there is a fundamental fact that's important to understand. Action cameras are not great at dissipating heat due to the smallness of their structure. And yet, these cameras are being made more powerful than ever before. Take the GoPro Hero 10 for instance. It packs that brand new GP2 processor, and it also will film footage in 5.3K up to 60 frames per second. Filming in 5.3K 60 frames per second creates a lot of heat, especially in such a tiny frame. That heat has to go somewhere, and there are no fans built into here to cool it. GoPro has not yet publicly acknowledged the overheating issue or offered solutions, but I do expect GoPro will do so within the next few months. If GoPro does so, GoPro will go a long way in improving their transparency with their customers, and it will also help if GoPro keeps their customers in the loop on these issues instead of pretending they don't exist. So I'm hoping GoPro will do the right thing with this. Now, with that being said, I do want to make it clear up front that more than 80% of GoPro Hero 10 owners will probably never experience the overheating issue, and this is simply due to how the vast majority of GoPro users use their cameras. I would be part of that 80%. The way in which I use this camera, I probably will never have any overheating issues with it. Now, there may be times that it feels hot in my hand, but it's not going to get hot enough to overheat and power off. Let me tell you, when I got this thing to overheat during my testing, it got really hot. So anyway, I won't bore you or waste your time with all of the raw data and details, but simply put, there are use cases where the GoPro Hero 10 will overheat. Here are the 4 scenarios where it is most likely to overheat on you. The first scenario is if you're shooting in a high resolution and a high frame rate combined for an extended period of time. Extended period of time would be defined as 10 to 15 minutes or longer and a continuous video clip. Scenario number 2 is if the camera is remaining stationary while filming in a high resolution and/or frame rate for an extended period of time. Scenario number 3, if you do not have the legs at the base of the camera folded out. This is folded out, and this is the legs tucked in. Scenario number 4, if you're using the GoPro stationary indoors for an extended period of time. So the reason more than 80% of GoPro users will probably never have the overheating issues is because approximately 80% of GoPro users only shoot 90-second or less clips at a time on this camera. So in other words, a lot of users are going around shooting clips like this for a couple seconds at a time. Then they're ending the clip, then they're doing another clip. And you know, they may be holding the camera and talking to it, but again, they're rarely going to be doing it 90 seconds or longer in a single continuous video clip. And another important key, most of the time when people are using their GoPro, they're gonna have motion going on. They're not just gonna have the camera sitting here, not moving. They're gonna be moving with the camera, or the camera itself is going to be moving. When GoPro designed the camera, they had this in mind. The movement of air makes a huge difference with this camera. It helps that heat dissipate more quickly, and being outdoors also helps it dissipate more quickly. This is why the two main situations where you're likely to see overheating are if the camera is stationary outdoors or if the camera is stationary indoors. Movement makes a huge difference with the camera, and I did not once get it to overheat when I was moving, even if I had the footage recording for an hour or longer continuously. It simply did not overheat, it kept going. And I will say, if you have the camera stationary outdoors, it will be a lot longer before it overheats versus indoors. And if you're outdoors on a breezy day, the camera probably will not overheat on you at all, even if the camera is sitting there recording for hours continuously. However, if you are experiencing the overheating issue, or if you're concerned about it, here's some solutions. Solution number one, always have the legs folded out at the bottom of the camera whenever you're filming. Like I said before, a lot of heat dissipates along the bottom of the camera here. And if the legs are tucked up, the heat tends to hold inside the camera. But when these legs are folded out, the heat is able to dissipate really effectively at the bottom of the camera. One of the biggest mistakes that causes overheating is when this camera is stationary and it's sitting on something with the legs tucked under. Not only are the legs holding in the heat, but when it's sitting on something flat, the heat also is being held in by whatever object it's sitting on. So this is basically the worst case scenario for overheating, when the legs are tucked in and it's sitting on a flat surface. In addition, I recommend using the Shorty tripod to mount the camera. Not only will the legs be out when it's mounted on here, but there'll also be a gap between the top of the mount and the base of the camera. Plus, you also have a really stable way to have this camera standing there. You're not propping it on an object, depending on that object not to move. So I definitely recommend Shorty to be paired with this if you're gonna use it stationary. Or if you're outside and using a larger tripod, simply putting one of the GoPro mounts on top of the tripod will also serve the same purpose. Solution number two, if you're using the camera for a stationary filming situation, I recommend turning off Hypersmooth on the camera. Hypersmooth generates a surprising amount of heat because that camera is constantly making sure the footage is stabilized. In addition, it also uses a lot of battery power. So if you turn off Hypersmooth, if it's mounted on something with zero movement, it's also going to save you a lot of battery power. Now, these two solutions alone are likely to solve any of your overheating issues. But if by chance they do not, there is a third action you can also take. And that third action is to either reduce the resolution or the frame rate to lower levels. So there may be situations where you're filming and you don't need to have the 5.3K. If the 4K is good enough for you, or the 2.7K or the 1080p, reduce it to that if needed. In addition, there are probably plenty of times where you do not need the 60 frames per second or the 120 frames per second. If you're able to use 30 or 24, that also is going to generate a lot less heat in the camera. The two common themes with high heat on this camera are a high frame rate and a high resolution. So if you don't need those and you're still experiencing overheating issues after trying the first two steps, I recommend reducing the resolution and the frame rate. Now, like I said before, I do expect GoPro to release some type of guidance on this issue. I expect them to probably tell you many of the same things that I told you. GoPro also may improve their thermals as part of a firmware update. So basically, GoPro engineers may be experimenting with this camera, and they may find ways to modify the firmware where it may allow for a slightly higher temperature before it powers off, or GoPro may tweak the performance limits of the camera. Though I kind of hope they do not do that. I like the new high-powered modes on here, and for the majority of people, the way in which they use their camera will not create any overheating issues at all. So to summarize, if you're looking to purchase the GoPro Hero 10, or if you've already purchased the camera and are concerned about overheating, more than likely you're going to be fine and not experience any issues. If you are in the 20% or so of GoPro users that do use this camera stationary for long periods at a time, whether that be a webcam or outdoor filming, you will probably want to apply these suggestions in order to prevent the overheating issues. I hope you found this video to be helpful. If you did, please hit that like button. If you haven't already subscribed, I'd love to have you on board. Please hit that subscribe and bell notification button so you'll be notified every time I publish a new video. I've got a ton more GoPro Hero 10 videos coming. I've been doing a ton of experimenting with this camera and figuring out all of the best this camera has to offer. Until we talk again, happy GoProing.